Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Big Ideas in Education. I am Dr. Sarah Boulos-Fye of Somerset Academy Schools, joined, of course, by my co-host Ryan Kairalla of Doral College. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be chatting with you.
Same to you. Let's get right into it. What do you have for us?
Well, Sarah, research shows that high principal turnover can have a devastating effect on schools, with studies showing that schools that have less stability at the top tend to have lower student achievement and higher rates of teacher turnover. However, we are seeing some good news on that front out of Missouri, thanks to that state's investment in principal professional development through its Missouri Leadership Development System, or MLDS. According to K-12 Dive, MLDS, which provides support and professional development for aspiring and veteran school leaders, has had a positive impact on principal retention in the state. Missouri principals in the MLDS program have retention rates 9 to 14% higher than the state average and 20 percentage points higher than non-MLDS principals. MLDS emphasizes principal training in areas such as accelerated student learning, social-emotional learning, and staffing classrooms. The program also offers micro-credentials for principals to upgrade their certificates without having to go back to college and get another degree. But more than that, MLDS provides Missouri principals with something that the research suggests is critical for a principal's long-term success: a supportive network. MLDS principals work closely with other principals in the state who serve as their mentors and are also given access to regional support centers that are staffed with specialists. As one new Missouri principal put it, quote, "I think that the best thing about MLDS is that you really are never alone, so it's not as scary as maybe it once was." Now, in Missouri, this being able to give principals a network, Sarah, takes on a whole other level of importance when you consider that a considerable number of the principals are serving at schools in rural areas, which means that there may not be another high school for miles at the high school that principal's at. So for that principal,
or maybe the only high school in the county, or
exactly. So it can be a very isolating experience for that principal, unless the state can take a step to give that principal who's out, far out from other schools, a supportive network to help encourage their development and give them that important mentoring and network.
That sounds amazing. I think we've talked about it on the show before, but there's a really depressing statistic that, nationwide, the average tenure of a principal is about 3 years, which is horrible for student outcomes, as you mentioned, that it really does have an impact at every level, whether it's teacher turnover, student achievement. And the fact that principals are not being supported as much as they should is a real issue. I love the idea that not only are they helping the leaders to grow once, they get to that position, but that they've provided this network of peers that they can talk to. Very much like teaching, being a school leader can be very isolating, right? You don't necessarily know who you have to talk to about your issues. You make about 80 billion decisions a day, and you don't have a lot of time sometimes to really weigh those options and get feedback from peers and talk to your administrative team about whether this is the right course of action. You just have to make a decision. And that is not just isolating, that is an exhausting fact. And so anything we can do to help administrators feel that they have a network or a place, a community that they can talk to. A lot of times when I have conversations with principals, I say, this is a safe place, right? Just say what you need to say. It's okay. Principals spend most of their day filtering themselves, right? For the students, filtering themselves for the parents, for their staff, because they want to make sure that that audience is heard and is seen. But sometimes they just need to vent, and who can they vent to if they don't have that community or that network? It's just such an isolating position. And there's a lot of elements that go into that. So to be able to know that you are supported by a board and a district that are seeing to your leadership, your growth as a leader, and also providing you a network of peers that you can bring those concerns to and talk about and vent to is tremendous.
Well, Sarah, I'm actually reminded of some of your own research in this area where you've written and researched a lot about the idea of the role that even informal mentoring relationships and opportunity can play in developing education professionals and helping them stay in the profession. And if I remember correctly, I know your research was mainly focused on teachers.
It was on classroom teachers, but I do think
the
that
principle
there's
is the same.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an extension there where you can see that the isolating nature of being in the classroom could definitely be applied to the isolated nature of being a school leader, right? Even more so in some cases.
Yeah, well, because if anything, the school leader side can be even more isolating, because at least if you're a teacher, there's always somebody next door that you can talk to or somebody across the hall. But if you're a principal, particularly a principal in a rural area, you might be the only principal for miles.
Correct.
And so it can be hard to find that informal mentoring interaction unless there is a infrastructure that's been set up by a school district or a state to make sure you get that mentoring.
And talking about research a little bit, there is a lot of research that talks about whether it's in the research space, right? If you are a researcher or if you are an educator, having a group of critical friends, right? Critical friends are an important part of any, I'm talking mostly about qualitative research, not really quantitative research. It's not, we don't talk a lot about critical friends in quantitative research, but at least in qualitative research, when we're working with surveys and really understanding people's stories and what we can learn from those stories, there's a lot of talk about groups of critical friends and critical research that can help you kind of not just get other voices to put some perspective and to get feedback from, but also to help you kind of not just not feel isolated, but see whether these are issues that others are experiencing, which is important, right? Is there something here that is kind of a global phenomenon that needs a bit more attention? The benefits of having this critical friend group is to help you understand, is this a global phenomenon? Is this something that we really need to pay more attention to? And just as importantly, is this an isolated issue that's happening, maybe a unique case that we can learn something from and learn what's going on, why this is happening? So the whole idea of having this peer group, this network of colleagues that you can go to, I think is demonstrating why they're seeing the results that they're seeing, why the retention with those principals is higher, and then also why they are able to grow as leaders. Too often, I'll be honest, and I think I'm guilty of this as well, once you get to a certain level in a school or an administration, you might be tempted to think that's it, right? But if you are not constantly growing, if you are not constantly learning, you're not just static, you are falling behind. And that's important for us to think about as school leaders.
Wow. And, certainly we're encouraged by these anecdotal stories that we're hearing about this program. And we're just encouraged by these numbers. 20 percentage point higher principal retention. That means a lot more students are going to have their principal around for more than 3 years, which means at a high school, you're going to have a higher rate of kids who actually have the same principal freshman through senior year, which I would imagine is definitely going to be correlated with positive student outcomes. Great news out of Missouri. And I think you have some more interesting stories for us. Sarah, what do you have for us this week?
Right. So not Missouri, but in Colorado, talking about high school students. High school in Colorado, Arvada High School in Arvada, Colorado, has tried to tackle a problem that they've been having, not just recently, but has been just exponentially made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is the graduation rate of its high school students. Arvada High School found that as a result of COVID-19, their juniors and seniors, their 11th and 12th graders in high school, who were already credit deficient, needing some support to get to graduation, were just not motivated to finish high school. And they were facing tremendous graduation rates. So they developed the Empowerment Program. The Empowerment Program targets students that have fallen behind on their academic credits, who need support getting all their requirements fulfilled so they can graduate on time. Principal Shannon Vigil said that the program was started 2 years ago after she and her staff saw the school's graduation rates were falling behind the rest of the district, partly due to the pandemic. The program is open to 11th and 12th graders who have earned less than 15.5 credits and provides students with a community approach to learning while earning credits more quickly than they would be able to in a traditional high school environment. And instead of traditional credit recovery models, they use what they call hexaders, 6-week periods in which students take fewer classes for longer periods of time during the day. We build them schedules that are bite-sized, Vigil said. So instead of taking 7 or 8 classes because they're credit deficient and trying to juggle all that at once, we have them take a small amount of classes in an intense period of time so that they can get through those credits faster and master the material and not feel like they're just juggling so many things. And this has been tremendously successful for these students, even though it's only been a couple of years since they have implemented it. They said of the 700 students they've had in the high school, they've seen an increase in graduation rate of 11%, which is what they believe to be the highest in the county. So that's a really fantastic statistic to see what's going on with these students. I really am excited about the way that they've put this in place. These hexaders is an interesting way of putting it. It kind of reminds me of maybe a community college or a vocational program. And it's really exciting to see that 11% increase in graduation rate. And they said, in addition to it being the highest in the county, they think it might be one of the highest in the state of Colorado, which Colorado is a pretty big state, a lot of children there. So it's exciting to see that kind of increase.
Man, that is an inspiring story. Just a couple stories this week of positive education interventions that are leading to meaningful, quantifiable, great outcomes for students and principals alike. I'm a big fan of that kind of model. What'd you call it, a hexader?
I don't know if anybody else uses that term. I didn't Google it, but it's definitely one that I don't hear very often. I don't think I had ever heard it before.
I mean, I get the idea behind it because certainly we see this a lot in higher ed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hexters. I think I wrote it wrong.
Hexters.
Hexters. So instead of semesters.
Whatever
hexters. Delightful
nomenclature we want to employ for this, it is something we're seeing in higher education, and my barking dog agrees with us, that at Doral College, we do this with our School of Ed program for a lot of the same reasons that you brought up, like much how it is easier for these students in credit recovery to only focus on one class at a time. We found that it's easier for our teachers in training to be able to focus their energy on fewer classes at a time. I think the other advantage, I don't know if this was specifically discussed in the article, in credit recovery for a model like this is when you do the classes one at a time, you can intervene earlier, right? If a student is having trouble with one class, you can fix that one class earlier rather than having them taking 6 or 7 classes at once. And only at the end of the 6 or 7 classes can you discover something's wrong. But by then, the student is now 6 or 7 classes behind. But under this model, we take things one at a time. If there's an issue, we can address it before the student takes on the next class. And so we can keep the student on track toward credit recovery. And as you mentioned, it's just a lot easier to juggle 1 or 2 classes at a time than it is to take on a full course load if we're trying to make sure these students can graduate.
Exactly. And not just that, they mention in the article, which of course we'll link in the description of the episode, but they talk about how they take that smaller amount of classes, but in actuality, the amount of minutes or seat time ends up being even more than what they would have had in a traditional semester model. And I love when schools think outside the box like this of how can we address this issue and how do we make sure that our students are still getting things that they need. And a lot of times, listen, I've worked with a lot of schools. We have so many barriers that come up with something like this. Oh, somebody might have a great idea, like, what if we could do this for our students? What if we could do that for our students? And then you come up against these real barriers of, well, what is that going to mean for the schedule? How can we code that? How are we going to make sure that they get the legal requirements of seat time or minutes or all of these real actual issues that have to be addressed? And the fact that they've been able to answer all of those issues and provide this innovative way to get their students the seat time they need, the attention that they need, the community that they need, because they also mention in the article that the students don't actually ever have to leave. They rotate the teachers into the classroom. So that cohort of students gets to work together through all of these hexters.
Well, and I'm guessing that's one of the reasons why the amount of instructional time per class is higher under this model, because the students don't have to bounce around from class to class. You stay in one room all day. You get to stay with that teacher for an extended period, so the teacher really gets to know the students. And as you noted, and I didn't even think of that, but that's really cool that the students get to know each other. You stay with those same students. The teacher moves around, so you're building relationships with those students. You form little study groups. I think that's really cool.
It's tremendous. I'm really excited about these two ideas, of course, that we shared. But I really hope that other high schools get the opportunity to really think about what are we going to do for these students who are having issues, and how are we going to address that? I mentioned it super briefly when I was reading about the article, but really the idea of these, and you kind of alluded to this with the Doral College model, but the idea of doing these 6-week sessions does remind me a lot of community college or vocational training, right? So I know I've had students that go into vocational training, like in cosmetology, for example. You don't take 4 months of hair color and then move on to 4 months of nail tech, right? You do very short bursts of intense instruction in this area and then move to the next one. And I think that what we're really doing is we're talking about how do we help set these students up for what's going to happen next. If you get to your junior year of high school and you only have 15 and a half credits, you are not a college-bound student. And too much of our high school setup is only moving towards college-bound students. And that is just not the case for so many of our students. And there's nothing wrong with that. And making sure that we set our high schools up for those students who are not college bound and helping them to see, listen, you are a learner and we're going to help you. And we're going to help you get to a program or a system that's going to work for you. And look, you have success here. And now maybe you can have success in your next area of learning, right? What training do you need? What technical assistance do you need when you're getting into that system? I was just talking with some middle schoolers this week about how they said they don't like taking tests. And I said, I'm going to tell you the unfortunate truth. I had to take a math test to be an English teacher. I had to take a test to be a waitress, right? I was proud Safe Serve certified, right? This is a reality that they're going to face in the world of work. And so I'm excited that we're preparing our students for that. And I hope we get to see this in more schools.
Without a doubt.
Thank you so much for being with us today on our exploration of these two topics, talking about how we can better provide professional development for our school leaders, and also this incredible example going on in Arvada, Colorado about the hexters, a word that I think is going to come into our vocabulary more and more. We're so excited to talk to you about them, and we'd love to hear more from you. What do you think, and what do you want us to hear about? Feel free to reach out to us using the hashtag BigIdeasInEducation. Hope you have a great week.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.